Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today we're talking about The Lowdown, the television series created by Sterlin Harjo and starring Ethan Hawke that is currently streaming on FX. I've got two guests today. First, makeup department head Sharon Tabb. Sharon, welcome to Below the Line.
Thank you so much for having me.
Glad to have you here. Also joining us is production designer Brandon Tonner-Connolly. Brandon, I'm glad you could join us.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, really appreciate it. I'm happy to be here and always lovely to talk to Sharon.
I think this is going to be a lot of fun for all of us. Warning for listeners, as of this podcast, The Lowdown has aired 5 of a planned 8-episode first season. Today's conversation will contain spoilers for episodes 1 through 5. We will not share any spoilers for episodes 6 through 8. This is both a warning for listeners and our promise to FX. But before we get to spoilers, this is the first time on Below the Line that we've talked about makeup and production design on the same episode. Sharon and Brandon, let's talk about the shared history that led both of you to The Lowdown.
You know, I started working with Sterlin on the first season of Reservation Dogs, was lucky enough to be a part of that. And, you know, kind of from my first meeting with him, just knew that he was, you know, a filmmaker that I really wanted to work with, kind of a storyteller that really wanted to support, you know, to be a part of his work in the future. And yeah, so, you know, we got through 3 amazing seasons of Reservation Dogs. And that's how I met Sharon also, kind of working on that show, and, you know, how kind of we came to collaborate and kind of, you know, knew that we had similar kind of artistic ideals and similar kind of quality standards for the work that we do. And yeah, and that kind of led into The Lowdown.
I mean, definitely it started with the pilot of Reservation Dogs. That's where we met Sterlin. That is where we learned the way that he works, what he expects. It was a learning curve, but it was like so amazing because it was nothing like that I had been a part of before, where there was just so much collaboration. And every single person that he brought in, they were all on the same page, which is something that I don't always feel like happens. So I think it was kind of just like, I mean, truly like movie magic behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. And he knows what he wants, but he also lets everybody be artists. And I think that's where, like, Brandon and they let us do our job. It's very collaborative. We have questions, we go to them. If they have input, they come to us. I mean, it's just very much in flux type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, just to elaborate on that, I mean, I feel like when we, my first time in Tulsa, or, you know, one of my first times in Tulsa, we were working on the season of Reservation Dogs, season 1. And, you know, Sterlin screened the pilot of the show for people at the Circle Theater, which is kind of the local independent theater in Tulsa. And, you know, screened it for community members, screened it for crew members, screened it for cast, kind of screened it for everybody. And really just kind of seeing everybody's reaction to that in a theater, you know, really kind of seeing people gasp at the right moments or laugh at the right moments, or just kind of really be taken by the show and just getting to see how important it was to people and how important it was to people in the community and how important the story was that, you know, that Sterlin was telling, you know, and the world that we were kind of creating with him. That it kind of just, you know, set the tone for the rest of my experience on Reservation Dogs, where, you know, it was just a really kind of special collaboration between the crew, but also the cast, but also the community members. And, you know, just kind of led to this sort of almost less hierarchical, you know, way of working, this way in which kind of everybody felt like they wanted to do their best work because they were so invested in the importance of what we were doing and so invested in the emotion of what we were doing and kind of wanted to bring their best to it regardless, and felt that they could, because Sterlin kind of has that, you know, creates that atmosphere where it's, you know, fun, you know, everybody's working hard to do the best thing, but, you know, it's enjoyable and everybody feels respected. Everybody feels like, you know, they're a part of it. And that's, you know, that's kind of what it created on Reservation Dogs. And we kind of continue that on The Lowdown, actually, just in terms of those working methods and that kind of stuff. And so that's part of it as well.
Yeah, I can remember at our wrap of season 1 of The Lowdown, and Sterlin, he came on there and it was all about like how you treat people, how you treat the people you work with, how you treat everybody the same. And I've always felt that way, but to just hear him say that and reiterate it, you know, even now at the success of how everything's come, it just shows, like, you know, what type of person he is. And it does start from the top 100%.
I did write about this in an article for a filmmaker, so I feel like it's okay to say. But I think season 1 of Reservation Dogs, there was this game going around that I think Sterlin started, where basically you write, there had been this term of affection, this profane term of affection, calling somebody a shit ass in the community there that we were doing it. And so they kind of, started this game of writing that on a piece of tape and putting it on somebody's back. And it was the type of thing that, producers were doing to other producers. And, the set PA, could tag the producer and, these different things. And I think it all, kind of culminated in Sterlin getting a license plate made up. I actually made it for him, got it made for him in a prop shop that said, shit ass on it. And he swapped out the license plate of one of his good friends who also happened to be the on-set dresser, at the end of the season. And he actually drove with it from Okmulgee, where we shot, back to Tulsa for like an hour without realizing that his license plate said that. But that's just kind of the environment where it's like, it kind of crushes the hierarchy in a way and just, brings everybody into loosening up and just knowing, what we're doing here is really important, but everyone should feel like, they have equal respect and like they have, equal kind of.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's rarer than it should be on these film sets where we really come together and do get that respect, and a crew can really bond over that. But it's even beyond that, the idea that it's also extended into the community and that all of you were carrying the weight of this story as well. I think that's really fascinating. Is that something, again, unique to Sterlin that he brings to these stories and in the execution? Or talk to us more about like what that felt like in dealing with the community in Tulsa.
Yeah, I mean, on Reservation Dogs, it was really feeling a lot of responsibility in terms of, I felt very much like, a guest also. And it was that sense of responsibility of, we're being trusted to tell these stories. We're being trusted to tell the stories of this community. And so for me, it just felt like a lot of, responsibility in a good way, and a really kind of great way where you felt like, okay, we have to make this as good as possible. And we have to kind of make this as intimate and as emotionally powerful as possible. And when we think about the spaces, I always like to think of designing the sets and dressing the sets as something that creates empathy in general. You want to include these intimate character details, and the more intimate character details you include, like where somebody kind of like what cabinet they open and what they have on their refrigerator, what the Bible quote is, or what the, kids' school schedule is, or just what they look at every day. The more intimate character details you have, the more that somebody gets to experience another person's way of life and another person's, the way they move through the world. And I think that intimacy creates empathy. And that's kind of always my goal when we're designing these spaces. But for Reservation Dogs especially, it was something where it was like, this is a real responsibility. And this is kind of what we're doing here, is kind of, being entrusted to tell these stories. And that kind of, follows through in Tulsa and on the Lowdown also, in a way where, I'll save getting into it. But, I think, again, that was a real situation where we're being trusted to tell the stories of some real people who Sterlin kind of loosely based some characters on, and some real people who provided inspiration for these things. And, we're working with their family members. We're working with other people who knew them. We're working with other people who, who were around and who are a part of their stories. And so for us, it's, again, another of these things where we're given this beautiful responsibility to tell this story, to help build this world, to tell this story. And, I think that is something that's unique to Sterlin's work in a way, because he understands that. He understands how important it is. And he also, kind of tells those stories and creates those narratives where, you can actually express what's happening in a community or express what people are going through in an intimate way.
Very well said, Brandon.
Brandon, you referenced the real life people. To be explicit, as I understand it, the Ethan Hawke character is based on a real life investigative journalist based in the Tulsa area, Leroy Chapman, who passed in 2015. And so, Sharon, what are your other thoughts about the influence of Tulsa and Leroy Chapman on the story?
Absolutely, and it's based loosely on him. So, but yeah, no, it is a responsibility, and you want to make sure you respect the entire story. You want to respect the people of Tulsa, the people of Oklahoma. I'm from Oklahoma, so that does help. But I have learned so much. Like when you do encounter the people of the community and the various natives that are involved on the project, you just make sure. Actually, you know what? I love getting to know them and talk to them when I get a chance, because to me that is like kind of almost like, well, one, I get to learn, and then number two, I just want to make sure that I'm doing the right job and I'm doing right by this, and I want to make sure that they look like they would look. I don't want anybody to feel like we're misrepresenting in any way, and so I definitely try to ask a lot of questions. I have met the family and I've asked questions, and they were so gracious and so happy that I was asking. That it makes them feel so much better about the project. Like that, we care. Like, we really do care, and it is an important story. And also learning about Oklahoma history, and obviously it's embellished clearly because it's Hollywood stuff, but at the same time we are telling some real life type of work of something that has actually happened.
Probably a misspeak for me to say based on, right? The word is inspired by the influence of
Yes.
the work that Leroy Javin did in the Tulsa area. Let's establish the filming schedule. As I understand it, you guys shot a standalone pilot for this, which is rare these days, I feel, in these shorter series of television, that they actually do a pilot and then put it in front of the network before moving forward. Is that how you guys tackled this one?
It was how we did it. We shot the pilot and then had a year in between. Basically, shot the pilot, between February, March, April, May, and then the following year came back and then did the rest of the season. And I felt like it was something where it provided some nice distance, which again, it's rare to have a pilot and then to, go through that process and have the series order now. But it was nice because it provided, there was no doubt in anybody's mind that it was actually going to happen. And I think everybody was kind of united in like, okay, like, yeah, when is it going to happen? Like everybody knew that there was something kind of special about it. But B, I think also provided some, a little bit of distance to be able to like, think about the project, think things through, really think the spaces through for me and really kind of think about the emotional beats. And the main sets that we had for the show are all, filmed on North 6th Street in Tulsa, the Hoot Owl Bookstore, Sweet Emily's, the diner, record store, tax law office, and Lee's apartment above them. And, that was something where we actually wanted to shoot it out in the world. Really, Sterlin wrote the pilot with really specific geography as to where those places are and really created this kind of little world for Lee to amble around in. And so, we wanted to shoot those in real locations. And, I kind of scouted around a bunch and found a derelict block that, it was the exteriors were one thing, but there was no power, there was no water, and the interiors were completely raw. And so, we kind of went in there and built all of our sets into these spaces, the bookstore, the diner, et cetera, and, kind of took over this whole block of Tulsa lovingly. And we're able to kind of craft it into this backlot for our show, which, was great for production in terms of shooting everything kind of in one place and being able to sort of move around there. But was great for us also to be out in the world, see the Tulsa skyline kind of outside all the spaces. And also, if the whole point of this Shaggy Dog mystery show is for the hero to kind of be able to wander around and the audience to wander around with him, we wanted him to kind of be able to wander around a real world and to not worry about the interior exterior split of shooting on a soundstage and, kind of limiting those things. And the consequence of that is we had built these real spaces into this block, and between the pilot and the show, a year transpired, and we just left them up because we, knew that basically we were hopefully coming back and we didn't want to wrap the sets out. So we kind of just boarded up the windows and kept them there. And then, that kind of got us to a place where the locations person would text me and say, hey, 2 more people stopped by and wanted to know when this diner was opening, or another group of people came back and said, hey, what's the deal with this bookstore? That kind of thing. So that gap of a year kind of did allow us to fool some people or to have that. And I took that as a good sign.
Well, we're going to dive into some of the specifics on both the sets and the looks. But first, let's take a step back. Where and how do makeup and production design overlap and interact in the course of creating a series like this?
I mean, I'll give an example of just if we talk about like episode The Dinosaur Memories, which is the one where Lee gets kidnapped. I feel like that is a good example as far as it's very like messy and cluttered, and it's very, I don't know, it's very eclectic, that's for sure. But when you see Marlon and you see all the people on that particular episode, I mean, they're gritty, they're rough, they're messy, they're bloody, they're grimy. So I feel like it just kind of, to me, it's set up, it's very similar.
That's episode 3 where he's taken out to the paddlefish compound where they're doing the counterfeit caviar.
Yeah.
And very intense set. But you're talking about the hair and makeup overlapping on that. Do you guys talk about these things ahead of time, or when an episode like that comes up, how do the two of you approach that, knowing what the other person's work is going to be?
Well, I mean, we don't work.
No, go for it.
Okay, go ahead, Brett.
Yeah.
No, I'm just going to say, I mean,
no,
we
you
don't
go for
really,
it, please. No, you go for it.
We don't really consult with each other, but I feel like maybe now we should going forward. I mean, but we are like in production, but we're in the same production meetings, and, we'll each probably have our own meetings with Sterlin and the director. Everybody's still on the same page of what's going on. So clearly, we are kind of doing a similar type thing, but it is kind of interesting how how it does all play together. I feel like even just, my looks look even better on his set, if that makes sense. It's like, it pulls it all together. I feel the same way about Deidre when she's in the bookstore. I feel like her makeup looks amazing around his entire design there. So it does. I mean, the environment plays with the subjects, which are the talent. That's what I feel like. What do you think, Brandon?
That's so kind of you. Thank you. I think that's extremely generous of you. Thank you. Yeah, for being so kind about the sets. No, I mean, I feel the same way. I feel like, for me, we're on the same page, with the overall aesthetic. One thing that I really love to see is, when I see like the tattoos on the characters, like when I see like Lee's tattoos and that kind of stuff. And when I see like other things like that, I see that there's wear and tear there. I see that, there's fading there. And I see that, that's kind of how you approach all the characters. And, it seems like, with the Dinosaur Memories episode and, with every episode, we kind of have this shared commitment to, the show represents Tulsa, and the show is very grounded in some ways, even though it's, elevated cinematically and elevated aesthetically in other ways. For us, it's really like we want a certain level of grit. We want a certain level of kind of reality to it. And, kind of just thinking about Tulsa in general, when we were thinking about the color palette for the show and thinking about all the different sets and thinking about how that interacts with everything, Tulsa is a place that's at the intersection of, the southern United States and the Midwestern United States. And, during the summer, it's very sunny and, there's a lot of direct sunlight. And then in the winter, there are cold fronts and there are ice storms and things like that. And just thinking that through with the colors and with everything, it's like, yeah, you want the sets to feel textured. You want them to feel weathered and aged. You want everything to feel like it is true to this place and is true to, to the reality of that. And, so that's kind of how we chose some of the colors in terms of, browns and deep reds and deep greens and things that would kind of show that age. And to me, it's like, I think that Sharon and I are on the same page, just about like, yeah, everything should feel a little worn. Everything should feel broken in. Everything should feel, like it's been weathered. And that helps with the overall aesthetic of the show. And I feel like that kind of like, overarching sort of agreement is like, where the collaboration comes in. And then specific moments where like, it's so funny to see like the space, like the Hoot Owl Books and like the register, the area behind the register, we kind of made it this wall with Tulsa artists and, Larry Clark, and recreating some of the art of Leroy Chapman, who's the person who Ethan's character is loosely based on, and, real family photos, etc., all those kinds of things. And then to me, we get it to a point where we're happy with it. We feel like it tells a story. But then, once the actor really steps into it, and once I get to see, Deidre with her makeup on and kind of how like in the finished look and everything like that, that's when it really comes alive, for me. And that's when I really get to see, oh, cool. Okay. Yes. Like this has worked yet again. Like we're on the same page and the character feels true to the space and the character feels true to this environment they're inhabiting. That's always a thrill for me to see that thing of like, yes, totally, like nailed it this time again. Like it all has come together and, and the character has brought it alive in that way. So yeah. And, Paddlefish Compound, I mean, just thinking about the makeup for John Doe and for, for Hook and for those other characters, like that was such a fun space to create, where for us, we're making this compound where these guys who, previously may have done moonshine, previously may have tried to make meth, previously, tried to maybe have a carnival background. We dressed in all these details that are supposed to tell the story of these people and their history. But then, to actually see John Doe walk onto the set and have him with this, really great kind of bloody makeup that is frightening, but is not over the top, is exactly grounded enough and is exactly gritty enough and like speaks to the character. Like for me, that's like the moment when things really come alive and when I'm always so impressed by Sharon's work.
Well, thank you so much. The environment sets the tone. But it's so funny, all your adjectives that you were saying about the gritty and the worn down, weathered, that's like all my makeup notes. So we're definitely all on the same page here. But yeah, it's so true. Like you work so hard on your own craft, and then when you see it with everybody else's, you're just like, it's that wow moment for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I'm also in the dark as where the series goes, but it seems to me like that Paddlefish Compound, that's a key set in episode 3, but it seems like a one-off. Again, you've layered all of these things about the history into that one set. I'm curious, is the approach any different when you go to like the bookstore, which is almost like a recurring character throughout the series? Anything about the way either of you approach the actors that have these one-off parts, the sets that are one-off versus the sort of ongoing places that we're going to revisit again and again?
Honestly, for me, no, because I take every character very seriously. They all have a specific look and they all have a purpose. And I mean, whatever I do for Deidre and for Lee, I mean, I would do the same for Marlon that plays John Doe. Like I'm gonna like see what their character is supposed to look like. I will contact them, talk to them, make sure that we're on the same page with everything. Same thing with like Hook, the guy that played Hook. In the script, it was he. I believe it says something about him having a scar, and so while I was doing the scar, I decided like, oh, what if we just put a little thing on the edge to make it look like a hook? Like maybe that's where he got his name from. And when I said that to the actor, he's like, oh my God, yes, let's do that. And so I said, let's just do it. Let's see it. Let's see if Sterlin likes it. Cause I think he came in for a test. And I was like, let's just try it. I really didn't know if you never know. I didn't know if if Sterlin was going to go for the scar with a hook. And he was like, yeah, sure, why not? And I was like, okay, there we are. We just created this really cool little scar with a hook that I don't know if anyone will notice, but now you will. But yeah, no, I approach it the exact same way. I mean, they're all part of telling the story, and they're all just as important. That's what I think makes it fun with these guest stars that come in. I love it so much. And you never know, they might be back. So gotta treat them all with love and treat them all the same. It doesn't matter if they're just there for 1 day or 2 days or weeks.
Truthfully, I feel the same way about the sets, even though it's different dealing with, a space than a person, obviously. And it's interesting to actually hear you say like that you have to treat them the same, but not only aesthetically, but also just like, yeah, like that is an actual person who's coming onto the set who's like, going to be acting with other people. So it's like, probably for how you, the degree of care that you show to them and like, the degree like how you interact with them, I'm sure it matters a lot to them and everything. So that was interesting for me to hear in both ways. But yeah, no, in terms of the sets, I'm sure it annoys a lot of people in the art department. I know that it does, but we kind of have to treat every single set, even if it's just something that's going to be, in for a minute or two, as equally important, and just kind of maintain the level of quality standard and maintain the commitment to just say, we're trying to tell a story here, and every character is important, and also, we want every character to have the same opportunity to have their story kind of told or have their story kind of heard by the audience. So, when it comes to like Hoot Owl Books, we definitely think about like, okay, they're going to be shooting in here a lot, for 8 episodes. So for me, when it came to things like the books in the store, we kind of hand selected about 5,000 of these books from a used bookstore in Tulsa named Gardner's, based on kind of, what we thought would really be in that space and what would be kind of in the bookstore that, Leroy Chapman, again, the very loose inspiration, worked at, and, and kind of what we thought Ethan's character would have and his interests. So we kind of hand selected these books just because I wanted the actors or the director or the writers or anybody, the grip, anybody to walk down an aisle and just pull any book at random and say, oh yeah, this is A, an interesting book, and B, it belongs here in this world. So, you think about that people are going to be in there for a couple of months. And, we also think about it technically, and we think about, okay, we want to make some of these walls wild so we can pull them to make it easier for crew access, easier for shooting. And, with Hoot Owl, we wanted to build a little office into the back, not because it was in the script or not because it was necessary for the pilot or for anything, but just because we thought, well, they might actually later in the season come up with a use for this, or this might be something that plays into the story. And it made sense for the space, and it, provides some additional depth. So it's that. But, then there's a set like Bonnie's house, which is in episode 2, where Lee goes to talk to Phil and to kind of check up on the Skinheads family. And, with that was something where it could only be that one episode. It could be more in the future. We didn't really know, but I really want to tell the story of that character and give everybody a shot at kind of feeling some empathy for them too, and kind of making them as real as possible, or, as real in the mind of the audience as possible. And I think, the last thing I'll say about it is we kind of have this commitment too, where we're designing the sets and dressing the sets for, what it looks like on camera, but also for what it feels like to the people who are in the spaces when you're making the show, and for the director, for the actors, for the crew, for the community members who knew the people who the characters are, kind of inspired by, and they're going to step into these spaces and be equally invested in them, whether it's for an eighth of a page or whether it's for 8 episodes. So we kind of always have this commitment to make sure that it's equally kind of equally emotionally powerful.
I think a challenge from the other side, though, is that if you are going to be seeing a character or a location through the entire series, and let's talk about Ethan Hawke's character, Lee, the decisions you make, and Sharon specifically thinking about like his tattoos, you have to make decisions about knowing that he's going to be in almost every scene. You're going to have to do these tattoos almost every day. Mm-hmm. They need to also not be so much that people are watching the tattoos rather than the Lee character. Talk to me some about how his look came together and if any of that thinking went into the final look.
Okay, well, when I first met with Ethan about his character, I mean, he already knew how he wanted this guy. He wanted him to be unkempt, raw, and gritty. There was no vanity in this. You know, he just wanted to bring this character to life the best way that he could. And like I said, he was super passionate about it. And going in with the tattoos, they already had in mind an idea of what they wanted. Ethan was really wanting the scorpion. He wanted a tattoo on each of his inner arms, and one of them was going to be a scorpion. And so we took a design and then we made it our own. Then the other tattoo, which is really fun, is it's a black bird tattoo, and it's the same exact tattoo that Sterlin has on himself. So I contacted Sterlin's artist and got a printout for it so that we could make a tattoo of it. Then on top of that, in the script, it talks about how Lee has a Mother Mary tattoo with a Confederate flag. Of course, I have no idea what that means. So I thought, okay, what do you want? And I went again. I thought it'd be great just to go to his tattoo artist because tattoo artists are so good at designing tattoos. That's their job. So I just went ahead and contacted his tattoo artist and said, hey, this is what I got. So he came up with something. I went to Sterlin to see, are we even close to this? And then Sterlin told me what he liked and didn't like. So we went back to the drawing board. I think it only took us like a couple of times, really. And then when we came back with the next one, it was the winner. And then it was just that whole, like, we got to make sure that it looks aged, it looks weathered. It can't look, if it looks fresh and too colorful, like you said, it could be distracting and it's not going to look real. So it took a little bit trying to get the weathering where it needed to get under control. And so that was that. So we only did 3 tattoos on him. So, and like you said, it plays for the character, but it's not like when you're watching him, you're not just all you're seeing is tattoos. Like they just kind of blend in with him. I think it works great, and especially with his costume as well. The costume and the tattoos and all of it's just he's a walking mood board. He is. He's got the look. He's got the look. And then same thing with there was no beauty makeup involved. We wanted him to kind of look kind of a little weathered down, and well, clearly he's getting beat up the whole time, so he's had better days. He doesn't sleep much and he's getting beat up all the time. And same thing with like the wounds and things like that. There was a lot of tracking because we have to keep track of how it's healing each day. So during the pilot, that was quite a process because I'm literally thinking like, okay, it's day 2 in the morning, would there be a little bit of blue and purple coming in even by like shooting at midnight that night? Like, because when we shoot each scene, we know the time of the day that it is. It's like, well, by this time, it actually would have shifted from what it would have been this morning. And then it changed, because bruises they change, within a few hours. Yeah, so the tracking was fun. So then when we went into episode 2, his personal artist, because he has a personal artist, he came onto our show, which was incredible. So then he got to take over and they decided to do the bandages and things like that, which I think play great. And it also probably helps with time as well. And I don't think you want to see every episode where he's just completely got bruises just the whole time. So I think it adds a little more to it and makes it, I think it works. Again, it's not super distracting, although he's beat up the whole time. Gets into a lot of trouble.
I thought that you guys really I thought that you specifically nailed, just that kind of balance of the tattoos, wanting to feel kind of, not distracting, as you said, but significant enough that, people associate it with the character and that, it again feels kind of lived in and real. And, we talked about this a little bit earlier. We're talking about that. I think on a lot of TV, there's a temptation to make things kind of to leave like a layer of gloss, or when it comes to either actors or when it comes to the settings or even the cinematography or different things. But I think with this show, kind of the ethos that I went into it with, and I think that you did too, maybe is about like, okay, well, we're not going to have this layer of gloss that's normally such a thing. We're going to kind of let it feel a little bit realer, even though it has some noirish elements and some kind of elevated elements. Still, it should feel like if somebody has a tattoo, it's going to feel like it's been weathered on their body, and you're going to be able to really feel that it's something that's been on their body for 20 years or how long they've had it. Mm-hmm. And same thing with the sets, like you're going to be able to feel that like the booths in this diner have had people sitting on them for the past 30 or 40 years, something like that. Like I kind of want to bring all that sense of time and all that sense of experience to all these kind of spaces and characters. So I thought you guys you nailed it with that.
Thank you. You did too. You made the diner look very well aged. And then can we talk about the diner's wallpaper? Can we bring that up?
Oh, thank you.
We got to bring up the wallpaper that everybody wants. I want it in my house.
Yes, let's talk more about the diner.
Yes.
Okay, we can talk about it, but I'm gonna ask you about tattoos also. I've got more tattoo questions.
Okay. Okay.
I
Well,
wanna hear more
whatever we
about
want to do
tattoos.
first. You said diner, and I
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
wallpaper.
Let's put a pin in Sweet Emily's the Diner. But because we're talking about tattoos, yeah, tattoos are sending a lot of information through this. And I'm also thinking of our villains and how their tattoos,
Yeah.
what they're
I'll talk
saying about them as well. Brandon, what was your question going to be along those lines? Something different.
No, I was gonna kind of get into the same thing. Like I really appreciated the character Alan Murphy's tattoos. I thought that he,
Oh
you
yeah.
know,
Okay. Yeah. I'll talk about Alan's.
yeah, it's got to show a different kind of niche, subculture is a really nice way of putting it. It's got to show a different, strain of white supremacy than even the other skinhead tattoos and the other stuff that's going on it.
Right.
So
Thank you. Okay, let me start with Blackie and Berta's tattoos first, because they're the two bad guys that get killed off in the beginning. So you clearly know that they're past skinheads. They're not. I think they're kind of at that. They're like good bad guys. They're bad guys. I don't know. We loved these bad guys. You can get a sense of the comedy with it as well.
They're a
with
little
these guys.
bumbling.
So
they're not the
yeah,
scary
they're bumbling.
skinheads. They're the bumbly skinheads. If we're splitting it that way.
Right. It's almost like the Home Alone guys. They're just wacky and quirky and funny. And anyway, so we didn't go crazy with the tattoos on these guys, but we did do some white supremacy type tattoos on them. Again, kind of kept it kind of modest, and they were kind of fun how we got to design them. Umberta have got like this weird little devil on his neck, and he's got hand tattoos. And then Blackie, we didn't do a ton on him, but we did do some like flames and things like that on his forearms. And he was really funny because a lot of times these tattoos, they actually will stay on you for a few days. So it actually can be in your benefit because then you don't have to reapply them every day. But he was funny. He's like, because every time he was not working, like he was always going and listening to music in the Tulsa music scene. So he was always like, no, these have to come off. So I'd be like, just leave them. You're a working artist. He's like, I'm not going nowhere with these tattoos. So it was really funny. So Eric would always make me take them off. So I always had to reapply them when he came back. But Berta, he wore his. He's like, I'll just wear them. It's fine. So that was fun. Okay, so now next level would be Alan. I think Alan's a bad guy. You just don't know what he is. And I think the reveal on the episode of him washing his hands, because you always see him, he's always long sleeve, he's always kind of conservative. And
he's with the business people. He's doing something shady for the business, Akron, the company.
Yeah, you can tell Alan, he works for Akron. You can tell he is shady, but he's always has long sleeves. So to me, he always looks kind of polished. I think you don't really realize how of a big deal of a bad guy he is until I think he starts washing his hands, and you're like, oh snap. I think that just is a big eye opener because you're just like, holy cow. Because all his tattoos were all white supremacy. Like he was deep. Like Blackie and Berta were nothing compared to this guy. This guy was like next level bad guy. And we had fun designing those. Man, it was a process. Like I'm telling you, we did several tests. It was wild. It was so funny because one of the people that came in to do the test on, they didn't know what they were being tested for. And they're just like, oh, I just heard you guys are going to throw some tattoos on me. And then I'm like, yeah, we're going to do some tattoos on you. I mean, it was just funny, it just didn't get kind of brought up. But anyway, when it came to designing these tattoos, our director wanted them all to be just crummy, like prison tattoos that were just all hand drawn. Now, I will tell you, in my gut, I felt like we needed something. I feel like we needed a mix. I really did. I think we should do a few, because I feel like Alan, even though he's a bad guy, I still think he would have some savvy not full savvy tattoos, but just a little more put together. Like I think he'd have some guys that really know how to do tattoos when he's out of the system or whatever. But our director was hung up on that. But again, my gut was telling me the other way. So when I showed Sterlin the shitty version that we first did, and like I said, you just know, you can just feel it when it's not right. And Sterlin's like, yeah, those are all very shitty. But it was really funny because the way he said it was like, can they not all be this shitty? And I was like, exactly. So let me now try. Because and that's the other thing too. I think after working with Sterlin for so long, I really can feel it when things aren't right. I mean, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it's just I know what he likes and what he's not going to like, and I feel like I get it at this point. And so we did a mixture. We did some hand drawn stuff of the stuff that the director wanted, and then I did some a little bit more polished type ones. And then I think it read well. I think it read a little more realistic too. And I love the way that the reveal came out, because that was a lot of pressure. Because number one, the subject matter alone, doing this research, if somebody goes on my computer and I've been looking up racist tattoos and all the different stuff. I mean, it was definitely eye-opening. It was really crazy because we did go off references of like real photos and things like that. So that was really wild. So anyway, it was great. I think it all came together really well. It took a lot of time because we custom made a lot of them, and then we had to have lots of printouts because I mean we sleeved them all the way up. So yeah. So I don't know where I was going with that other than it was quite a process, but it was fun too because I mean I think the reveal just really shows how crazy this character really is. I was really excited about that moment to be finally seen because then you're like, oh, okay, Alan was already scary. Now he's even more scary.
I thought that you really nailed, again, like that step up in kind of a, white supremacist culture where it's like, yeah, Blackie and Berta are kind of on one level and their tattoos kind of tell that story. And then once you actually get the reveal of Alan's tattoos, it tells you that he's kind of on another level and kind of has a slightly more old school kind of a perspective about it. And, is even like probably involved in like, different kind of prison gangs and that kind of stuff. And so I thought you really told that story really effectively and the tattoos really kind of brought that across.
Yeah, and that's what I love about storytelling. I mean, I love being a part of it and just especially when you do get to those like real moments and you're just like, wow, not that I want to be telling that story, but it is, stuff that did happen. So, we're just here to be just storytellers.
Well, I think this idea of storytelling will bring us back around. Brandon, tell us the story of Sweet Emily's, the diner.
Oh, yeah. No, thanks. Sweet Emily's, it's a diner, and we had kind of built it into this space on the corner. One of the reasons why we'd kind of chosen this block is it had the space that could be turned into our restaurant. And, it required us to bring in our own kind of custom countertop for it, or from like a countertop, do all the flooring. We did the kind of checkered tile that's close to the counter. And then we did this really low pile carpet, which is, if you think about like indoor outdoor carpet that, kind of always absorbs stains. We had that in the dining room, and we really kind of wanted the whole space to feel like it had been there, forever, that it was this kind of night owl diner. We wanted people to mistake it as something that kind of had been there for 30 or 40 years or, 50 years. And so for the wall coverings, once we did the other surfaces and thought through them, I kind of really wanted something that was, a mixture of a texture, like a wood panel or something along those lines, just because that feels true to those diner spaces in that part of the country, and also kind of really takes age very well. Seems a bit dated as well, but then also another texture, so it wasn't just all kind of very uniform. And so for that, we thought about a wallpaper that has some kind of pastoral scenes, something that could be background, something that's isn't too distracting, but if you happen to be there by yourself having a cup of coffee and smoking a cigarette at 2 a.m., it'll kind of entertain you for a minute or two while you look at these kind of these images. So we kind of had that idea and talked about it with Sterlin and came up with the idea of, well, what if we have these pastoral scenes in these little images, but they are also kind of a really subtle, nod to Reservation Dogs. And it's not something that, would break up, the continuity of our world or anything, or would kind of distract, but just something that, again, is very kind of subtle, very kind of background, kind of as an Easter egg, almost, again, as much for the people in the space as it is for, kind of what comes through in the final recording of the show. So we hired a custom illustrator, my friend Mary Hayes, who came in and kind of pulled out some scenes from the different Reservation Dogs episodes, talked about it with Sterlin, got him and myself on the same page as far as which ones we wanted to do. And, Mary kind of drew these different scenes, and then we tiled them together. We printed the wallpaper. And, again, one of the things we always try to do is, use local vendors and use local kind of resources in the community, because it kind of gives us the ability to do things that are a bit out of the ordinary and don't really happen when you're kind of relying on the traditional production resources of New York or LA or a city like that. And, B, because it puts resources back into the local community, which is kind of, again, a big part of us being there. And so, we had a local company called Blue Stem do the wallpaper printing. I'm not sure they had ever printed anything like that before, or, didn't think that we were crazy when we first contacted them, but they got into it. It was great. Yeah. We, put it up, aged it. And, when everybody came in, there's so much overlap between the Reservation Dogs crew and the Lowdown crew. And when everybody came in, it was just really gratifying to see the emotion on people's faces and people kind of laughing and, even some tears about it, just to be able to sort of bring this really kind of familiar thing into, this new world that we were all building. Yeah, and Sterlin did ask for a couple rolls of it. I believe that we gave them to him, so I'm hopeful that there's a room in his house that has some Reservation Dogs wallpaper. Yeah.
You know it. Well, when I first saw it, because you don't know what it is at first, but it's like you said, it's subtle. You see it and you're like, oh my God, that's like some really cool vintage looking like trees and things like that. And then you start getting closer, you're like, shut up. You're like, oh my God. And then you don't realize till you get closer and closer. But I mean, even just standing back, not knowing what it is, it was like beautiful and it was so fitting and it was vintage and it was aged, like you said. It was just, I mean, seriously, it's brilliant.
Thank you. No, it's so kind of you.
Love it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It was a really fun and special thing to do. It was cool to be able to see that with everybody. It's nice to see it like as the episodes air too, because I think there's always like I always look at it and I'm like, oh man, is it going to be really obvious or is this? And then you see it in the
Right.
finished show and you're like, oh, actually, like no, it is subtle. It is kind of
It is
Easter egg.
subtle.
It does kind of stuff. Yeah, which I liked. So
Well, as a fan of the Reservation Dogs myself, I'm going to be going and pressing pause on a replay on some of these so I can enjoy it Easter egg like.
So fun.
yeah, totally. It's part of this whole universe of things that, this whole universe of projects and everything. I think that somebody else called it the Sterlin Harjo universe of, all these different references and things like that. So it seems like that's what we're building there also.
I love it. That is so fun.
Well, one last scene I want to ask you guys about and what effort it took to pull this off. Episode 5 concludes with Lee being picked up by the cops and taken through this house party. One shot through the house, out through the back. For me, I'm getting very strong Apocalypse Now vibes from the entire run of that. Talk to me about what was on the page for this and then what it took to bring together.
Okay, well, for mine, it was just we had lots of cops. And so we wanted them to be like stereotypical cops. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but I mean, it was a lot of people, like I know probably over 100. We had a certain percentage of mustaches. We had a certain percentage of clean shaven. And we tried to stay away from beards. I think there might be a few, but they would have been like maybe ex-military, not necessarily cops. So, but we tried to keep all of our cops. They were like seriously shaven or a mustache, just classic, typical. And so for me, that's really all it was. And then some of them had tattoos, which we left. Again, for makeup, it was just more of just lots of shaving and getting people cleaned and polished up for the party because they're just getting loose after work or whatever these crazy cops are doing. So really for me, that's all it was. Now, I will say for Brandon, it was probably a whole different story. So yeah, that's me just getting all those cops ready. Really.
No, I mean, that's challenging in and of itself. And, it brings, like we said, brings the spaces to life. Yeah, it's just, it's scary even being around that many fake cops, I think, when you're in that. But no, I mean, you're right on with the Apocalypse Now vibes. I think that was something that we were definitely thinking about when it came to, okay, he's going to be kind of led through this compound to get to the Marlon Brando-esque figure at the end. Thinking through the script, a lot was on the page in terms of it being this cop party and he gets dragged through almost this kind of hellish house where all of this, kind of increasingly crazy stuff is happening. And I think that, Macon Blair, the director for the episode, kind of worked with Sterlin to figure out this concept of a one shot. What if we do it all and, just one shot, Lee being led from the police car all the way through the house, winding through the backyard, winding through these other elements, and then kind of punctuating in, revealing Donald Washburn at the end. So, from there, it was just like, wow, this is a really fun process of who can think of crazy things that these cops should be doing in their off time at this party. And then how can we visualize that? And so, it was just like, okay, there's definitely a firing range. There's definitely, crazy barbecue. And okay, we almost wanted to look like, a barbecue that's like from that nightmare sequence in The Burbs or something, where it's like you could grill a whole goat on here. And then, we kind of also want what's inside, to be them with, different women and to be them with, somebody's playing video games. And it was really important that it escalated too, that when you walk in the front door, you think, oh, this is a house party. And yeah, this is weird that all these people are cops. And yeah, this is definitely an intimidating environment to be in. But then as you go, you're kind of stepping up to, oh, they're being more physically aggressive with him and also sting this kind of side. And then also there's a firing range that he's being led through. And then also this was an idea that I pitched that I was really happy that everybody was crazy enough to get into. There's a car that's from the impound lot that somebody's just beating on with a sledgehammer just because that's, what cops want to do and they're blowing off steam for this too. And then all of that just kind of leading to this climax with these explosions of seeing Donald Washburn kind of in this gazebo. And again, like We practiced it many times, had everything kind of laid out to a T. We kind of positioned the gazebo, which, we built the gazebo knowing that this entire kind of sequence was going to climax in the sort of moment, and wanted to, make sure that it was kind of positioned properly with the DP, with the gaffer, with lighting, kind of placed it to the inch where we're going to be. And then just ran through it so many times just to practice before we actually started doing the explosions, before we actually started doing the gunfire, and safely, of course, everything safe. But, so it was a big moment. We didn't shoot it until about 9 p.m. on a Friday. We had run through it a number of times by then. And then finally we went for a take. It was such a relief to see that it worked, and that it was, really kind of magical, and that Warner kind of worked, and that, everyone felt great about the performance, and that they kind of hit all the marks as they should. And yeah, it was just a great collaboration between everybody. The funny thing is, the gazebo is such an important part, which, I don't know if I should say this, but it's TV and scheduling being a thing. And Kyle MacLachlan wasn't technically available for when we were shooting that episode. So, we knew that we needed to kind of build this gazebo in such a way that the person who was emerging from it was going to be strongly backlit, and was going to be, a silhouette and a shadow out of necessity, and, out of aesthetics also. So we kept that in mind, and had to do that. And then also that was another part of the wonder of seeing the end of it and seeing, oh, great, okay, it works. That kind of works too. And then we shot the other part with them actually in the gazebo at a totally different location at a totally different time. When Kyle was available later on, we kind of just broke down the gazebo and then moved it over to a place that was next to where we were shooting something else with him, and we're able to kind of, do a little movie magic there and get away with that.
No, for real. And it was another just like wow effect. When you were on that set, it was, I've never seen anything quite like it. It's something. It's wild.
Well, that's probably a good lead in for my next question, because as we promised at the top, we're not doing spoilers for the balance of the series. But are there other subtle elements that run the course of the season you think our listeners should watch for?
I'd like to talk about Deidre. She is Lee's employee at the bookstore. Again, we were talking earlier about having a year off from the pilot to episode 1. It gave us time to, I feel like, for me personally, to maybe just dive deeper a little bit into the characters and try to just, you get to know them as you go along per episode, and their characters may evolve. Things are going to potentially shift and change. And for her, because in the beginning, we thought she was just going to be like a rocker chick. But then as you see her wardrobe come together, and you see her really cool hair, we had to do it just a little more than just some black eyeliner. To me, I felt like it was just kind of a little boring. So starting episode 2, Sienna and I, who plays Deidre, we start talking you know what? Once we find out what you're going to wear, let's do some funky, cool eyeliner. But not over the top, but just enough to where she's an artist. So I feel like she would do something a little artistic. So every time she's going to have a really cool, different eyeliner. I mean, there's times that we do dots, and I don't know, have you noticed her eyeliner yet, Brandon?
Yeah, no, I have. Totally. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no. So you'll start seeing as she goes on, her eyeliner is going to just keep getting more and more interesting. So I would like for people to watch her eyeliner and see what they think. That's one thing for me that I can think of. And then something that we haven't talked about, I don't know if anybody has really noticed, because again, it's another one of those subtle things and you kind of have to look for it. But Marty has a gold tooth, and we added that just to give him a little more, he's seen some stuff, but yet he's pretty savvy. And I don't know, again, it's not in your face. And there's sometimes that when he's talking, I have to look. I'm like, okay, is it going to show? And it does, but it's subtle. So yeah, we have fun with that, keeping track of that as well. We have backups.
Nice. We'll watch for those elements. Brandon, how about on the production design side?
I'm excited for people to see how the conspiracy collage in Lee's apartment kind of progresses over the year. That was something that in the script was written as, it's kind of like his brain kind of spilled out onto this wall. It's sort of like this space where he, kind of has his own conspiracy theories and puts things together. And so we really thought, okay, what can we do to make this sort of different, or what can we do to kind of make this a little bit, more unique than what you've seen in other kind of collage walls and shows. And, I came up with the idea that he's a journalist. He's a writer. So is the person who he's loosely based on, Leroy Chapman. So, we kind of took the board as somebody, as, a journalist kind of assembling their articles. a writer kind of assembling their piece as they're writing it, and kind of took that as like a progression of how he would be kind of putting those together. And for me, it was, again, one of those things where there was a lot of sort of freedom in what it ended up looking like in the end, as long as, we kind of hit the notes that were important to Sterlin. There was, leeway in terms of, what it could be. And I looked back at, the work of Leroy Chapman, who, was a journalist in Tulsa and loose inspiration for Ethan's character. And, he had written a couple of, very kind of influential articles. One of them, probably the most influential, being about a figure named Tabb Brady, who is one of the kind of modern founding fathers of Tulsa. There was the Brady Arts District, the Brady Theater. His house was something that was kind of, on the map of, tourist spots. And, and he wrote this article, just kind of got the city to reconsider his legacy, saying that, he was actually somebody who was involved with the Ku Klux Klan. He was actually somebody who at some point had been fundraising for, an organization that was linked to the Confederacy, and he took part in the Tulsa Race Massacre. So that was something where it kind of rallied this reconsideration and this kind of digging up of the truth of that. And we wanted to show that. So, we kind of crafted that cluster on the board about Tabb Brady and that story, crafted the cluster about another story that Leroy had written about Elohim City, this white supremacist compound in Oklahoma, about the Osage Hills murders and land theft in Oklahoma history, all of those things. And, to me, it just felt like another one of those examples of, we're being entrusted to tell these stories, the story of this community, the story of this place, and the story of, this person who kind of inspired this. And so for that, it's like, yeah, we do want to tell the story of people digging for the truth, of uncovering these hard truths, of uncovering these difficult truths, and of really kind of reckoning with them in a way. So that, I think, is something that was exciting, to be able to link the narrative and, the fiction of the show and the white supremacists in there to, this kind of real life grounded truth that we have through this collage. And I think the only other thing I'll say is I really liked what Sharon said about working with a local tattoo artist for Lee's tattoos. And I feel like that's something that we try to do also in the art department, is work with local artists. For the Tulsa Beat office on this one, we worked with a muralist named Alexander Taman, who he had done murals that spoke to the Greenwood community in Tulsa. And we wanted, in the Tulsa Beat office, Cyrus's character to have a mural that spoke to the history of the Tulsa Race Massacre, but also important figures in the Tulsa Black community, and then also kind of a modern sense of reparations, or a modern sense of what that character would be thinking about, a sense of what that character would think, would feel as far as justice. So Alexander came on, we designed a mural together, and he kind of executed it in the space, and Sterlin, really kind of loved it, and again, provided kind of the basis of the idea. Yeah, I feel like, again, same thing, the lesson on Reservation Dogs that we were thankfully able to put into practice a lot is, when you're going for a sense of authenticity and representing a community and trying to tell the story of a community, you want to, have that community as involved as possible in the process. And you want to, be kind of led by that community. And so, we want to work with these local artists who kind of, have that story to tell and be able to kind of incorporate that into our world. So, yeah, so two things to watch out for. Not as exciting as the Gold Tooth. I know everybody loves Keith David. Everyone loves Marty. I wish that I had something like that. But yeah, so it's excited for everybody to see it, and excited to see this eyeliner too. Excited to see how Deidre's eyeliner unravels over the next couple episodes.
Right?
So.
That board is just incredible. There's just so much work that goes involved. I always think about when we wrap up, I'm guessing that board, does it just stay on the set, or do you guys have to take it all down? And I mean, that seems like a huge task in itself. I mean, I deal with continuity, having to take lots of photos, making sure my bruising tracking is on point, making sure makeup matches. But I feel like you have so many little things, and they're loose things, and some of them, I mean, I don't know. It just seems like a lot. But I know you have an amazing team that works with you too. I mean, it takes a village.
No, thank you. Yeah, it is an amazing team. Tava Sampson, the set decorator, is amazing. Andy Eklund, art director, also amazing. And, we just have so many great people. And for that collage, aesthetically, we liked the idea of it being on a surface that's, attached to the wall. So it's not just on the wall. And we chose these ceiling tiles.
Okay, that makes sense.
We chose these ceiling tiles that we used in the Hoot Owl bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like Lee stole these from the bookstore, or from the construction materials from the bookstore, flipped them around, and then screwed them to the wall, and then put the collage on it. And, that is aesthetically what I kind of was liking, but then also has the dual purpose of, we can kind of take those panels off and then,
take it down.
Yeah, exactly. And then put it back up.
Gotcha. So it's all still there. Yeah. It's basically one big art, and you just wrap it up.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of little things to deal with.
Yeah. It's still there for when we have the tour.
We've talked a lot about the authenticity and the respect for the community. Not to get lost in that, this show's a lot of fun. Can you guys tell us, has there been any talk of a season 2?
I have not officially heard anything. Brandon, do you have some insight?
No, I have no more insight than you, I promise. I haven't officially heard anything. I think everybody is hopeful. I think the reviews have been, amazingly positive, and I think everyone's really hopeful. And I think we're all, kind of thinking about, oh yeah, where could this go, and like where could these spaces go, and where could these characters go, and everything. So yes, I think we're all excited about the possibility.
Absolutely.
Well, while we wait to hear on that, what is going to be next for each of you?
I have another project that's being released November 7th called Sarah's Oil. It's another thing that's kind of like it's about missed lost history, and it's a really good one. It's another Oklahoma story set in 1913, and so I'm very excited about that project coming out. Yep. And then I'm on a project right now, but I can't discuss it. Darn it, can't talk about it.
Now I really want to hear about that project that you're on that you can't talk about. I feel like
I know.
Way worse. I'll text you about it. You can't talk about it. Maybe
text me later
after that. There are a couple different things with directors that have kind of worked with before who are kind of gearing up for things, in the start of next year. So I'm kind of soft prepping things with them and getting those ideas and those kind of concepts in place. But besides that, just enjoying the Lowdown at home also with everybody else, and see what which one of those kind of projects kind of takes me there, or whether we're on season 2 next year also. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, good luck to both of you. Really glad you could come here and talk about this show. On that note, we're going to call it a wrap. This was a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so mumuch for having us. This was awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Listeners, I always appreciate your feedback. My email address is skid@belowtheline.biz. That's B-I-Z. The release schedule over the next few months is still TBD, but if you need a fix between new episodes, there are more than 270 in the archive. You can listen to past episodes on our website, belowtheline.biz, or wherever you get your podcasts. Closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Juan for our logo, and to all of our listeners, I appreciate you. If you want to support us, consider a purchase. The logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. Other ways you can help. First, give us a positive rating wherever you get your podcasts. Second, tell your friends about an episode you enjoyed, because that's how we gain new listeners. All of that aside, whatever your engagement, the fact that you're still listening means a lot to me. Thanks again from Below the Line.